has the pressure been ratcheted up on Josh Heupel now that Nick Saban is gone and retired? I wrote a column on this. It hasn't gone up quite yet, but it will go on offthehooksports.com here shortly. So we encourage you to check that out. Also, recruiting updates are there frequently, thanks to Caleb Giroux. I think it has significantly, and I'm going to tell you why I think so. But Caleb, what are your thoughts?
Yes, I think it has. Now, it hasn't as significantly as it would if Kirby Smart left. That would have been the peak pressure. And so I'm holding back a little bit on this because as we've talked about, Tennessee and Alabama don't always have the same recruiting fights. But next year is the first year, guys, since I've been covering Tennessee, next year's the first year that they're going into the season not just automatically considering themselves 0-1 because they have to play Alabama. And that's a huge
right. And in my column, I pointed out really 0-2 with Georgia and Alabama. You're going to be double-digit underdogs. It's not to say they're going to lose that game. Obviously, they beat Alabama just a couple years ago, but that would be the norm. You would go into a season as a touchdown or double-digit underdog to two teams. Okay, but that's a lot to overcome from the get.
It is, particularly when you're trying to rebuild a program. Now, Tennessee's not rebuilding anymore. If you're Josh Heupel in your fourth year, you hope Tennessee has arrived. But it was still, we all knew Georgia and Alabama were still, I think you and I both talked, like, I've been very high on Tennessee for 2024, but I felt that even if Josh Heupel was going to succeed at Tennessee, from a talent perspective, I always thought as long as Nick Saban was at Alabama and Kirby Smart was at Georgia, from a talent perspective, they'd always be in a separate class, even if Tennessee could beat them. Right? You thought the same thing, right? That even if Tennessee maybe had an undefeated year, snuck into a national title, like, if you look at NFL draft picks over the next 5 years, Tennessee's never going to have more draft picks than Georgia. That's just not going to happen with Kirby Smart at Georgia. And you felt the same was true at Alabama. So the hope was that you had enough talent to be able to upset them, but it was still going to be an upset. Now, with Alabama at least, them going to Knoxville, all the transfer news, Nick Saban no longer there. I mean, I wouldn't be shocked if Tennessee was favored next year against Alabama at home, which is crazy to think about because they haven't been favored over Alabama since 2007.
Yeah, I think it depends who they lose in the portal, right? So we'll wait and see on that. But no, it wouldn't surprise me if they were favored. Again, that roster is in so much flux right now with Saban stepping out and guys curious. I mean, here's what changes, and it's partly Saban, it's partly the playoff. Tennessee never has to beat Georgia to be one of the preeminent college football programs in the nation. They can lose to Georgia, win 10 games, make the college football playoff year in and year out, and then we'll see if the chips fall where they may. I believe that Josh Heupel's offense will be tough to deal with in a playoff situation on a week-to-week basis. So I think that gives Tennessee somewhat of an advantage. So I'll get to the question. It's on YouTube. We'd like to hear your vote. Today's tough question brought to you by Andy Mason Real Estate. AndyMasonRealEstate.com. Real estate experts with over 4 decades combined experience in East Tennessee. Best prices, best service in the Knoxville area. Pretty awesome. You can't beat that. All right. So I go to our YouTube page, and if you want to go on there, we would love to see your vote, as today it is this. And I have not even asked for Caleb's input yet, but as I pull it up, today's tough question is this. With Saban gone, Tennessee should win a national title in blank. I've got 2024. I've got within 3 years, within 5 years, and then who knows? What do you think's leading at this point?
I'm going to say within 3 years is leading.
It is significantly 69% of the vote. 2024, 6%. Within 5 years, 6%. And who knows, within 19%. I guess that's still those Tennessee fans that are still unsure about the program under Josh Heupel. And I understand, give him time. But you're right. Kirby Smart would have been a more significant retirement or leaving his school than Saban because of the recruiting area that they overlap in often. However, if I'm Tennessee, I'm going to start to focus on Alabama a little bit. Tennessee did have a guy named T. Martin that won a national championship from Mobile. Tennessee has the ability now to take kind of a sidetrack, an easier path to becoming a national power with Saban gone. You want to beat Georgia. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying just it's okay to lose to Georgia each and every year, but it's way different to me with the college football playoff. Now, let's look at when Tennessee was in their heyday. Okay, who was Philip Fulmer coaching against? I mean, my goodness. You had Brad Scott, Lou Holtz, South Carolina. You had Drunken Ray Goff and Jim Donnan at Georgia. And you had Steve Spurrier at Florida. And whoever Kentucky and Vanderbilt trotted out there. But it was just a two-team playoff. It was one game. So if you lose to Florida, Katie bar the door, there goes the season. It should never, ever be like that again for Tennessee. They should never, ever, ever have that mindset. It changes the way you look at college football. And it's going to be weird, year number one. But there's no team out there other than Georgia that you would go into a season saying it's going to be an upset, a significant upset if Tennessee beats them. And we don't know how long Kirby Smart will keep it rolling. Historically, you would say not as long as Nick Saban, who's one of the greatest coaches ever. Maybe he's a great coach for 6, 7, 8 years and does something else, or something crazy happens. That happens. But it's just monstrous for Tennessee. And I think it does give Tennessee fans reason to add a little bit more pressure to Josh Heupel.
The crazy thing about Kirby Smart is that he was actually 6 years younger than Nick Saban when he won his first national title. Than Nick Saban was when Saban won his first national title. And from what we understand, Kirby Smart has no desire to leave Georgia. Now that could change, but it seems like he wants to do this thing for a long time. And so, because Dave, I think you covered Saban when he was if Saban hadn't left LSU, he'd have done at LSU what he did at Alabama, right? Like he probably might have another national championship.
Oh yeah, no, I think he would have done the same thing.
Yeah, exactly. So Kirby Smart could do that and surpass Saban. Now, you are right. It is scary and things are clearing out. And I want to give a quick history lesson because you bring up Philip Fulmer. One of the reasons everybody at Tennessee knew it was over for Butch Jones was in 2016 when Tennessee was favored to win the East. That was when Georgia made the transition from Mark Richt to Kirby Smart. South Carolina had moved on from Steve Spurrier. Florida had had Jim McElwain as head coach. So everybody in Tennessee had everybody back. So you're thinking at Tennessee, if Butch Jones can't win the East this year, he's never winning the East, ever. And of course, he didn't win the East. He finished second to Florida, and then he made his cringe champions of life comments. And I think at that, we all knew that 2017 was over because everybody saw what Georgia was about to become. And so that was it. So you are right. You got to cash in. It's twofold. The SEC is a little bit easier, and there's a 12-team playoff. Now, I wanted to stick with this for a minute, Dave. On a national scale, Jim Harbaugh just interviewed with the Chargers. But by the way, the Chargers tweeted that he interviewed, which means Jim Harbaugh's gone, right? The fact that the Chargers tweeted that they interviewed him means he's gone.
Yes.
And yeah. Does it put even more pressure on Josh Heupel on a national scale when programs like Michigan lose a coach like that? Now with the college football playoff and college football becoming more national with the 12-team playoff.
Yeah, but don't you think the next great coach is going to emerge? I mean, I think Harbaugh is fantastic. It took Harbaugh a long time to build them up, though, to a championship level. So, yeah, I think it helps. So the more great coaches that go in the NFL, it helps Tennessee for the elite programs, especially when they get in the playoff. The question is Tennessee a team that gets in the playoff? Because I think they're going to be an annual playoff participant. I think they're going to be in 3 out of 4 years. I think the question is, does Tennessee advance? And at some point, if you don't, you have Rick Barnes like questions. But certainly, I think Harbaugh moving on to the NFL would be great for any program that wants to win a championship.
I agree. And it'd be great for any program, and Ryan Day would be so grateful at that point too. But I think this is. But actually, I want to bring that up. I think the reason I bring that that up is Jim Harbaugh. You know the fights he had with Nick Saban over satellite camps. You know Jim Harbaugh has done skirted every rule he could to recruit in the South, basically, and it's kind of worked in his favor. And I don't know if other coaches could do that. We know that Ryan, as long as Ohio State sticks with Ryan Day, I got to say, however people feel about Ryan Day, it's very clear, isn't it, that the magic is wearing off and that the tide and the public sentiment is turning on him. And you know this, Dave, you covered Philip Fulmer. The minute a slither of public sentiment turns on you, it wrecks you on the recruiting trail, doesn't it? Because that narrative is out there.
No, and I think the narrative, I think the narrative is out there for Alabama, which is why I would focus on recruiting the state of Alabama, which is better than it was back in the day. The narrative is Nick Saban's gone. I grew up watching Nick Saban. I remember I was 5 years old. I'm a high school prospect, and I watched Nick Saban, and now he's gone. I think
that's where I was.
That narrative play out as well.
I agree, and that's where I was going. Was Tennessee borders Alabama. And honestly, Knoxville is about a 3-hour drive from Cincinnati. You think if Ryan Day stays unpopular, Tennessee could have a North Alabama, Southern Ohio pipeline, both of those areas?
Possibly. I think first and foremost, it gives Tennessee a chance to lock down. There's an area in South mid Tennessee that is pocketed by a bunch of Alabama fans. And when I say Alabama fans, I'm not talking about guys that put the flags up. I'm talking about the high school coaches. I'm talking about there's some boosters there. I'm talking about guys who actually influence recruiting. So there are a lot there. I think you can reclaim that right now. You better.
You could, and guys,
right now.
And for our listeners who don't know, for who don't study history, ask Philip Fulmer. This goes back to the 60s, how many ties that Alabama area has to Southern Tennessee, because Philip Fulmer was very close to choosing to go play for Alabama. And Doug Dickey was the one who swung it for him. And he just wanted to play for Doug Dickey. But yeah, that's you're right. That area is deep. And honestly, I'm not so sure Johnny Majors, who is also from that area, I'm not so sure he doesn't go to Alabama if they're not really, really bad when he commits to Tennessee in 1952. And so this is a very long-standing tradition. That area, even though it's in state, has been hard for Tennessee to lock off, and they sneak in some very elite talent every few years. Boo Carter's from that. I mean, we're basically just talking the Chattanooga area. Let's call it what it is. And Boo Carter is there. They lost Amari Jefferson to Alabama this past year. And you're right. And North Alabama has some of the best high school coaches in the country. I think I've told you guys Hoover High School was on MTV in 2004 for what they do. So if
Barry
North
Pruitt
Alabama
was on that, wasn't he?
He didn't know what asparagus was. They poured asparagus on his plate, and he's like, "What's that? I ain't never heard of that." So, yeah. So, but for those who don't know, North Alabama, I think Tennessee has a stronger pipe, because here's the big competition if Alabama falls to the wayside. It's Auburn, obviously, but Tennessee has a stronger pipeline into North Alabama than I think Auburn does. For those who don't know, North Alabama people are very they find South Alabama just an unlivable place, and so they don't want to go to Auburn. And they're partially right. I find North Alabama unlivable, but I also find Auburn unlivable. So
you're just hardcore on some areas of the country.